Welcome to Midnight Mysteries. If you feel like listening to a horror story, you're in the right place. I had booked an Airbnb in a quiet seaside town for a relaxing weekend. The apartment was in an old villa with a large garden and a breathtaking view of the ocean. When I arrived, I was greeted by the owner, an elderly lady with a kind smile who handed me the keys and wished me a pleasant stay. The apartment was elegant and well furnished, with antique furniture and paintings by famous artists on the walls. I immediately felt at ease. While unpacking, I noticed a black and white photo on the desk. It portrayed a young woman in a wedding dress, with a melancholic expression on her face. Curious, I asked the owner who the woman in the photo was. She hesitated for a moment, then replied, "She was my sister. She disappeared on her wedding day, many years ago. We never found her again." Struck by the sadness in her voice, I decided not to inquire further. That night, I was awakened by the sound of footsteps in the hallway. Thinking it was the owner, I got up to check, but there was no one there. Returning to bed, I noticed something strange. The photo of the woman was no longer upright, but was lying horizontally on the desk. This, combined with the footsteps I had heard, sent shivers down my spine. The next morning, wandering around the villa in search of something to eat, I found myself in the basement and, hidden behind a curtain, barely visible, was a door that almost blended in with the wall's coloring. With my heart pounding, I opened the door and descended the stairs, which led me to a small room partially illuminated by a couple of small skylights at garden level. In the center of the room was a skeleton in a wedding dress, surrounded by wilted roses. Next to it was a letter yellowed with age. With trembling hands, I opened it and read only the last words. It told of how she had discovered that her future husband was having an affair with her sister, who was none other than my host. Devastated by the double betrayal, she had decided to take her own life in her wedding dress, letting her body disappear forever. Shocked by the discovery, I ran up the stairs, determined to confront the owner. But when I emerged from the basement, I found myself face to face with her, a mad look in her eyes and a knife in her hand. "You shouldn't have pried," she hissed. "Now you'll share her fate." I managed to escape the villa, but not before she wounded me in the arm with the knife. I ran to the police and told them everything. When they returned to the villa to arrest the woman, however, there was no trace of her. She had vanished into thin air, just like her sister years before. I can't believe I agreed to spend the night in this place. It was an apparently normal Airbnb, with an appealing description and photos showing a cozy and bright house. But as soon as I arrived, I felt something strange. The house was located in a suburban area of the city, surrounded by trees and deserted streets. The owner, a friendly man named Dave, had left the keys in a container on the door. "Welcome," he had written in a note attached to the keys. "I hope you like my little retreat." The house was just like the photos, but there was something unsettling in the air. Maybe it was the feeling of being completely alone, or maybe it was the fact that the house seemed to have a story to tell. I decided to ignore the feeling of unease and settled into the bedroom. The room was clean and tidy, with a comfortable bed and an adjoining bathroom. But when I lay down on the bed, I heard a strange noise. It was as if someone was walking above me, even though I was sure I was alone in the house. I tried to sleep, but the noise was too loud. I got up and decided to explore the house. The kitchen was clean and well organized, with a table where Dave had left a bottle of red wine and another note with a message. The dining room was empty, except for a large bookshelf that contained old and dusty books that surely hadn't been read in years. It was then that I saw the door. It was a closed door right next to the bookshelf in the dining room. It wasn't mentioned in the Airbnb description, and I hadn't noticed anything strange when I entered the house. I approached the door, but it was locked. Believing it to be some sort of basement, I grew curious and began the search for the key. It was simple because the key was on the mantel just a few steps from the door. I opened the door. Stairs led up to the top floor, and I climbed them to find myself in a dark and cold room with cobweb-covered walls. There was a bed in the middle of the room, with dirty sheets and a blood-stained pillow. And then I saw her. She was a woman, sitting on a chair next to the bed. Her eyes were closed, but she seemed to be looking at me. Her skin was pale and cold, and her lips were curved in a sad smile. I immediately ran down the stairs, nearly breaking my neck, locked the door behind me with all the turns of the key, and tried to call Dave, but my phone had no signal. I was alone, trapped in that house of horrors, so I decided to flee, leaving my bag and belongings behind. I didn't care about losing the deposit. I didn't want to stay in that place any longer. When I arrived at the police station, I told them the whole story. The policeman listened to me with a skeptical expression, but then under my pressure, he did some archive research and found something. That house was the scene of a murder in 1975, he said. Perhaps the woman you believe you saw was the ghost of the victim. Know that the owner, Dave, is the son of the murderer. I don't think I'll ever rent a house on Airbnb again. I can no longer turn back. I rented this house on Airbnb for a week, thinking I could spend some time alone and work on my writing project. The house was isolated, surrounded by woods and fields, and seemed like the perfect place to focus. The structure was old and noisy, with creaky floors and doors that opened on their own. But it was also cozy, with a large workroom and a well-equipped kitchen. The owner, a woman named Sarah, had left me a welcome note and a vase of fresh flowers on the table. The first night was peaceful, and I slept soundly, but the second night I felt something strange. I was sitting at the desk, working on my project, when I heard a noise behind me. I turned around, but there was no one there. Then I heard a whisper, almost a female voice, murmuring words I couldn't understand. I finished my glass of wine and convinced myself it was just the wind or the house creaking, and decided to go to bed, sure that it was just my imagination. However, the next night was even worse. The voice was louder and more insistent and started calling me by name. "Mark, leave," it said. "Mark, you must not stay here." I began to feel scared and anxious. I took my phone and did some research on the history of the house and discovered that it was built on land where a psychiatric hospital once stood. Guests of the house had always reported strange paranormal phenomena, but Sarah had never mentioned any of this. I started to feel trapped and terrified and decided to contact Sarah. But when I called her number, a man answered. "Sarah is dead," he said, "and you will be next." I fled the house that very night, leaving everything behind. I don't think I ever want to go back. I don't think I ever want to rent a house on Airbnb again.